Welcome back, viewers. You are still tuned into Prime Live. In light of World Mental Health Day, suicide is one of the toughest conversations to have. But for Lino Muller, such conversations can save lives. That's why his company, Safe Talk, has designed suicide prevention training that empowers communities to recognize the signs, offer support, and take action before it's too late. Lino lost his own brother to suicide, and when he came back to South Africa after working in the UK in sports psychology sectors, he partnered with a local NGO which was focused on mental health. Now, join us in our conversation today as we talk about how he opened up Safe Talk, a non-profit organization dedicated to suicide prevention and mental health awareness. Assalamu alaikum, Lino. Thank you so much for joining us on Prime Live.
Wa alaikum salam. Thanks for having me.
I think this is great timing for us to be able to have this conversation, and I really commend the effort you've made to start such a pivotal platform like this. But before we get into the program and the organization, can you talk to us about the transition and your inspiration to move from the area of sports psychology into mental health?
Sure. So it all happened quite organically. I've done many things. One of them has been sport. I started off as a personal trainer and then started sports coaching, doing sports conditioning coaching. And from there, it sort of went to mental wellness of the people that I was coaching. So I saw a tremendous need for that we didn't just empower people physically, that basically mental wellness was a big part of that. And from mental wellness, it went basically to mental health. And that's how I transitioned, and I wanted to reach a broader audience, not just people within sports. And that's how we got to where we are now.
I think it's a really commendable thing to make the transition into mental health, and I love that we are moving in a direction in the world where it's becoming less taboo to talk about mental health and to open up to these kinds of conversations, particularly with young people, allowing them to speak freely and talk about how they're feeling, and more so taking away that stigma that is associated with mental health issues as well. Now, this is an incredible program, and I've never heard of something like this, and I wish there was thousands of these all around in the world, and inshallah that will be something for you in the future. You'll be able to launch this in countries all over the world. Yes. Talk us through the services that are offered. I know that this is a program that is offered for schools, for corporates, as well as for communities as well.
Yeah. So basically I'm aiming this at leaders, basically anyone who's responsible for a group of people. Teachers form a very important role in this. It's not just teachers, it's coaches as well. For instance, my first group of people that I'll be running this course with is a group called the Igoli Squash Club, and they have 2,000 underprivileged kids who they're looking after. So can you imagine how important it is for their coaches to be able to deal with these kids that might have some vulnerability? And like you said, the stigma is a huge part of it. There's so much stigma around suicide, and that also comes from the fact that suicide is actually suicide was illegal. It was a crime, right, to take your life. This was only legalized in the UK in 1962, and a few years later, us being colonial, the same law was also basically abolished in 1968. So, I mean, this is also where language comes in. We speak a lot about committing suicide, right? Committing suicide makes it feel like you're committing a crime, and that's where the word commit comes from. So that is just one of the stigmas, right? And we're trying to change that. So we're trying to use easier, softer language, attempting suicide, dying by suicide, following through with suicide. These are just some of the things to destigmatize them. Obviously, there's a lot, but in the course we deal with destigmatizing so that we can talk more freely about it.
I think you've touched on something so important. The language we use when we talk about different mental health issues has a lot to do with how people feel about having them, coming out and talking about them. Yes. And we make people feel like something is severely wrong with them for having a mental health issue. And I think that narrative that you're trying to push forward and changing that kind of language that we're using when we're talking about difficult things like suicide is so important in order to remove that stigma and create a more open platform for people to want to come out and say, I'm really struggling and I've been having suicidal thoughts, because that's ideally what we want.
Yes.
We want to be able to prevent suicide. And it is a horrendous experience for the family and friends of people who have taken their own life. It's a very difficult thing to have closure, and I really send my condolences to you and really commend you on using a difficult experience to help other families prevent this. And the first thing that people always think of, how did I not know?
Yes.
I didn't see the signs, I didn't pick up on anything, and that's exactly what you're trying to address in that program. Can you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, well, imagine a parent of a child who's died by suicide, right? There are so many instances where this just gets swept under the carpet because of stigma and because of shame and because of guilt. And we need to make people understand, firstly, that it's not their fault if somebody takes a life, right? You cannot grieve properly if that is so. The case with my brother, for instance, I don't think anyone grieved properly. This was many years ago, so it's not recent, and we were all naive about it. So we said things like, well, he was selfish, right? It made us feel better, right? It took responsibility away from us as a brother or as a father or as a mother. It was also like, well, if he wanted to die, so be it. If you know, these are the things that we need to get rid of. And we also didn't understand the signs. We had no idea. To us, it was just like one day he was there and the next day was gone, and then excuse me, we didn't know why. And imagine if we could educate people and to spot these things and to be open about them, because first we have to spot them, right? We cannot do anything about them if we don't understand it, if we can't identify certain signs. So once we identify a sign, what we teach is, what do we say to that person? You know, we talk about the things that you should say and the things that you shouldn't say, and we encourage to talk about such things. And that is one of your first steps in eliminating the silence and the stigma around it.
I'm glad you've addressed that, and thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your own experience with us. I've heard that so many times when someone has died by suicide, where a family will say, that's such a selfish decision. What about your kids? What about your family? What about your friends? And I love that you address that it's taking away the responsibility that you had to check on that person,
right.
to make sure that they were okay. And even if they didn't have the words to tell you that they were not in a good place, we should know them better to be able to pick up that you're not being yourself. And we aren't always conscious of the little things that somebody is going through and the little tell signs. So that's an important program that you've brought forward, to be able to highlight that part of ourselves, to not be so self-involved that we can't pick up signs and symptoms in someone else. And that's the reality of life. Life can be very stressful, and we can get so involved with our own lives that we struggle to identify if someone we love is struggling, because we're so focused on our own issues and our problems as well. Now, this is an incredible organization, and I really once again commend you for starting something like this. Funding, let's talk a bit more about that. I'm sure you know, you want to be able to take this program to communities that really need it and possibly can't afford to have programs like this.
Right.
Can you please share some information about the funding, and if there's any way that our viewers at home can even contribute to a program like this?
Yeah, I would appreciate any sort of contribution. We're trying to make this program accessible to everyone. I mean, the other day I was talking, I had a chat at school, and then someone said, well, can we do this at another school in a very poor area? It was, a child had just taken their life, and teachers were thirsty for this kind of information. They really wanted help. And it would be great if I could go to a school and not have to charge them anything, you know, to cover our operating costs. So funding would be a welcome idea. I do have a bank account which we can make available, I don't know, maybe on your program. And yeah, please, as much funding as we can get. The more funding we have, the more people we can help. And like I said, I want to make this accessible for everyone, even those who can't afford it, because you must remember, suicide comes from a social construct as well. So you'd find in poor areas, in impoverished areas, previously disadvantaged areas, areas where there's lots of crime, this is where you find your high rates of suicide. So it would be an amazing help to get funding for it.
Absolutely. I mean, environmental factors can have a huge impact on one's mental health. And if you are living in difficult circumstances and in smaller communities in South Africa or disadvantaged communities in South Africa, they are riddled with so much of issues that can really affect a young child's mind, for example. Are you on social media platforms? How can our viewers get in touch with you or contact you to be able to contribute and be part of the program? And for any corporates or businesses out there who are looking to implement a program like this within their companies, can you please share that information
Yes,
with us?
so we've just opened a Facebook page. So we're Safe Talk, suicide prevention on Facebook. I've got an Instagram page, which is safetalk_care. And our website is under construction. So it's just about ready. It wasn't ready just yet for the show, but within the next few days it will be ready. And I've got an email address, if I can say, it's safetalk at what are we on? Safetalk at info at safetalk. I'm sorry, info at safetalk.co.za. People can get hold of me on there.
Thank you for sharing those details. We do have a lot of viewers who want to actually know how can they get in touch with you for. I can imagine that this would be an incredible program to incorporate in corporates and businesses, because we know that corporate spaces are synonymous with mental health issues, and those closed off, very high pressure environments are the breeding ground for a lot of unaddressed mental health issues as well. What do you wish we would be doing better as a country to support particularly young people when it comes to mental health? I mean, now as an adult, I cannot imagine being a young child in this generation. There's so many different stresses, environmental factors, and so many different things that kids have to go through whilst they're going to school, whilst they're going to university, for example. What do you feel we could be doing better for our children in South Africa?
Basically, being open, talking more about it, destigmatizing it. Our suicide statistics for young people are incredibly high in this country. Our highest risk factor are people between 15 and 29, which is so different to the UK, where we have middle-aged people that are at risk. And that tells you a lot about the stresses young people are in. And as we've spoken before, this is basically, they need hope in terms of jobs, in terms of being able to support their families in the future, obviously. And we need to open the conversations. We need to educate as many people as possible. And what we also do in our course is we sort of give a pathway, right? We talk about the suicide pathway, and we do suicide plans, like safety plans. The pathways are basically me looking for partnerships who I can signpost people to. We're not counselors, right? We are here to prevent this, and at the end of the course we have to create a pathway, a signpost. So I have spoken to Islamic Relief, for instance, who are very happy to collaborate with me, and they're going to be one of the signposts. And anyone else who wants to partner with me, I'm open to suggestions. I had a conversation with Lifeline. We still talking about putting them up as signposts, but I'm sure there's other people out there, and I want as many as possible, right? Because there are people in areas that have no idea where to go or who to get counseling from. So this is part of the course, and as a group in the course, we will start creating these signposts and pathways. Like I said, I did this in the United Kingdom, and they're incredibly organized in terms of this. Yet they have probably 1/3 of the suicide rate that we have here, and we have of their infrastructure. So this is what I want to bring to South Africa, is a proper infrastructure so that we can safely talk about this and find pathways on how to prevent this. Be proactive, be positive, and let's stop it in its tracks, basically.
Absolutely, and empowering people with the information and the knowledge to be able to prevent suicide is so important. And not just professionals, but everyday South Africans need to be equipped with this level of information, so that you can identify these factors in a friend, a family member, or a colleague even, and knowing how to approach somebody who's having these kind of suicidal thoughts or going through that very dark space is such an important thing, because they are in such a sensitive position, and often or not we don't always know the right thing to say or the
That's
right
correct.
thing to do, and
Yeah.
sometimes the things we do can maybe even push someone further away from wanting to seek any kind of help or support. So knowing the right things to do and the right things to say, it's almost like first aid for
That's
mental
correct,
health.
yes, yeah.
And I would love to see this program expand across South Africa and be something like a first aid program. You'd have somebody come to the school and teach you basic first aid so that you can help. And it's just as important as being able to facilitate physical first aid for someone. It's just as important. And it's crazy to think that this isn't a concept that we already have, because it is life-saving material and life-saving information. For Safe Talk, can you tell us what is the future of the company? What are your goals for the next 5 years?
Okay, so since I've decided to start this, which was just a few weeks ago, well, I've been thinking about it for a time, and I've just implemented it a few weeks ago, and I've had crazy response, positively crazy responses. So Lesotho is also one of the places. So basically, Lesotho has the highest suicide rate in the world. So I've also, I want to expand into Lesotho. I've got the Abu Bakr Jabi Foundation, which I'm partnering there. We need to make a difference there. Cape Town and the Cape Flats, really vulnerable group of people there. I've partnered with Yusuf Daniels, who's an award-winning author in South Africa and a motivational speaker. He speaks a lot at schools, so we're going to target schools in the vulnerable areas. I want to, like I said before, I want to make it accessible. I want it to spread across the country, and I want to educate people, and I want us to be open, and I want us to get rid of the stigma, so that we can be educated, prevent suicide, and have an open dialogue about it. It shouldn't be a difficult conversation to have.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. But Lino, thank you so much for the insightful conversation today and for your innovation in the space of mental health. I've never heard of a program like this. And now that we've had this conversation, I cannot imagine what we were doing before there was a program like this. I think navigating the space of mental health is a difficult one for anyone. And being able to empower people with the information and the knowledge to be able to deal with it and assist others is incredibly important, particularly in our disadvantaged communities. So thank you for sharing your concept, your organization with us this evening, as well as spreading some much needed sense of awareness when it comes to suicide prevention.
Thank you, Nazira. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's been such a pleasure. Viewers at home, that was Lino from Safe Talk, the CEO of Safe Talk. We were talking about all things suicide prevention and awareness. Please do reach out to them on Facebook as well as via the email that was provided as well. If you are a professional in the mental health space or in the mental health sector, please do reach out to them. They would love to be able to welcome you on as a partner. As I've said throughout this conversation, I cannot imagine that we didn't have a program like this before. I think it's so important for us to equip ourselves with the necessary information and skills to be able to perform first aid, as so to say, when it comes to mental health and awareness. So if you would like to partner with the organization, please do reach out to them. If you are a corporate or a business, please do also reach out to them to empower your employees with this valuable information. And if you would like to see the project in your community or your school, and you're able to fund a program for a community and school, particularly in disadvantaged areas, please do also reach out to them on their social media. On that note, it is time for us to head over to an ad break, and we'll come right back.